All right, so now I'm on my overlay layer where I can dodge and burn shadows. And what's nice is I can dodge and burn them everywhere. So I can dodge and burn shadows onto the landscape too. So if I wanted to burn a shadow into the landscape, I'm on the dodge tool. So I just brightened it up. See that? That's why history is your friend. That's why we have so many history states. Back before I dodged all that stuff. Go back to burn. So if there's something in the landscape that needs to be affected, like you need to add a little bit more shadow, or it's a little bit distracting to have such strong highlights in the background, I can burn those down as well. But primarily I'm looking at my character and making them match the lighting of the scene. So the next tool is the dodge tool, which is right above the burn tool in the essentials setup. And I'm going to do the same thing, affect the midtones with an exposure of between 20 and 30%. Pressure sensitive brush. And now I want to hit the highlights. Where is the light hitting? So we can almost completely change the lighting on our character, should we need to. Big difference there in how they fit the scene. Okay, so now, what does this look like without the landscape there at all? Looks like this. The shadow's pulling away, it's softening. It seems to make sense that I could smudge that even more, soften it even more. And I can do that with the smudge tool or the blur tool. But I'm going to go ahead and take that strength way up on the blur tool because it's a slow moving tool. And then I probably want to take my eraser and really just soften that shadow as it pulls away too. Because if you observe shadows, that's kind of how they work. Okay, so I've got the lighting on the character. I've got the shadow underneath the character. Now, how can I use atmosphere to kind of glaze them all together? And that's that old technique that we introduced with the first assignment, which are texture fills. So I want a misty texture fill. Clouds rolling in. Fog. All that stuff. This looks promising. I can search for something with quite a few pixels, but I'm probably going to soften it so much it doesn't matter. So I'll just go for large. I kind of like the looks of this. Okay. Save that to the desktop, minimize it. I'm going to bring it on top of everything. First thing I'm going to do is make a duplicate of it, rasterize it, and then Gaussian blur. So go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian blur, take off all those really hard edges. Okay. Now I can try different blending modes. Try overlay. That brightens everything. And it's helpful, but it's a little too dramatic. Soft light is a good choice. Pin light will make it feel a little heavier in the air. And I can play with combinations. So I might start with soft light. Now that's 100% soft light. But what's nice about that is that moon that was so in focus and so sharp now feels a little bit further away, a little bit kind of glazed into the background. And my character lighting works well with that soft light filter. Next, I can make a copy of that. In fact, I can make a selective copy. If I want this mist to be coming from this river, which is a really plain looking river, I'll kind of do a buildup of mist around the river and then coming up and around the feet. So kind of like this. And I'm going to take that selection and I will select it from my texture fill layer. So just duplicate it. Turn my texture fill layer back to soft light. So I have this texture fill to play with. And then just like a shadow, I might soften its edge. Whoops, I'm on the wrong layer. There we go. And I might smudge it. And kind of push it and pull it where I need it. See, I want those back clouds to still peek out from the mist. You see how it softens it as I smudge. This is like pushing through the fog. Wonderful tool for atmosphere. It's actually a pretty terrible tool, in my opinion, for painting. But for pushing atmosphere around, fantastic. And our next assignment, we'll get a lot more practice at that. And I can make the brush bigger. And push it a little bit more dramatically. And I like how that's kind of covering up the feet a little bit. Masking around this rock. And now I can take a low opacity eraser, knock it back a little bit more, make sure it's very soft edged. And I'm doing that with the eraser, but I could also just take the overall opacity down a little bit, right? But it's kind of fun to see what you can get away with. And you can use this to improve the illusion of your fantasy landscape as well. Now, usually things in the foreground would be a little more in focus, and things will soften more and more as we get to the back. So I can do that same trick again. If I want to mask this moon a little bit more, I can take some atmosphere, copy it, and duplicate it from the cloud layer, blur it, smudge it, push it where I want it. And just keep taking the focus down on that moon. More and more. I can duplicate it again. Same sort of thing. And just pushing that more and more into the atmosphere. All right, and all of this is without color changes, without levels changes. This is just straight mapping of textures. Oh, one other thing. There's another foreground element that's affecting this composition, and that's these trees. So if you miss something like that, I might need a little bit of that trees like right under it to overlap my character. So relative perspective is generally the easiest way. So let's get some of that tree material. Duplicate that from the background and bring that up to the top. So there's not much of it. There's a little bit of it. Like that branch right there. So I can erase that away. And by now we're getting pretty used to our tools and how effective they can be at making these kind of differences. So just a little bit of overlap with the tree. Contiguous turned on. Just get rid of these. Now that's very subtle, but sometimes those are the little details that really help sell it. Now, to finish it all off, I might take my background layer, make a duplicate of it, and then play with the levels of it, see if it helps to mute the highlights a little bit, see if it helps to lighten or darken the midtones. Take down the contrast a little bit, help my character stand out. That's how we can get it to match. And we just play with it until we're happy. So we composed or composited quite a few new elements using a lot of soft brushes, a lot of smudging, and a lot of adding atmosphere. And they all made a pretty dramatic change to our image. But you wouldn't know that they were made if you didn't see kind of the before and after. So that's why I really like doing these things on new layers. So I can play with opacity and kind of dial it back. We tend to overdo things. So for instance, with my overlay layer, I might decide just to take the opacity down on it a little bit. And basically, if we turn our background layers off, we should see all of the choices we made. So to turn this assignment in, you're going to turn in two things. You're going to turn one layer in like this. That has your foreground elements, anything that you added into your landscape, your character, its shadow, and any textural dodging and burning that you did. So I'm going to save this with my name and call it assignment 3 shadow map as a JPEG. And on our JPEGs, we want it to be fewer than 5 megabytes. And then we're going to save it again with that background turned on so we can see how all those things were used. So I need to push this behind a little bit. There we go. Yeah. And then save it as a JPEG with your name as assignment 3. And first, you should have it saved as a Photoshop file. This is not assignment 1. And those are the two that you will upload. Okay, so in the next demo, I'll go back to the creature I designed and the landscape I designed and just show you how those steps would apply to that. But they're pretty simple steps. Shadow, lighting, atmosphere. But they're going to be different for every scenario. I keep seeing little things I can play with. Bring out a little bit more of those rocks.